Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting into a quieter side of history, a world where ordinary behavior was never truly ordinary, where silence could be feared, love could be punished, and simply being different might mark you as broken. In medieval villages, a person who stared too long into nothingness was whispered about as cursed. In great courts, a single misplaced emotion could destroy a reputation forever. And in the heart of empires, power was no longer held by crowns, but by those who stood quietly beside them. This is not a story about madness as we understand it today. It's a story about how society once defined the human mind, how normal thoughts became signs of illness, how emotions became evidence, and how control learned to hide behind protection. We'll wander through medieval towns where sadness was mistaken for possession, through royal halls where love turned into scandal, and finally into ancient Rome, where the guards meant to protect the emperor slowly learned how to decide who lived, who ruled, and who vanished. These are the moments history rarely shouts about, but always remembers in whispers. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes. Let the noise of the day slowly fade away, and allow history to speak softly as we begin our quiet descent into the shadows of the past. Imagine this for a moment. You wake before dawn, not because of a bell or a duty, but because your mind feels heavier than your body. The world outside your wooden window is still, wrapped in mist, and yet something inside you refuses to rest. In the Middle Ages, this quiet heaviness was not called sadness. It was not called grief. It was not called exhaustion. It was watched, whispered about, and slowly transformed into something dangerous. In medieval mental illness beliefs, the mind was never simply the mind. It was a battlefield where God, sin, and unseen forces competed for control. In small villages shaped by church towers and seasonal labor, normal was not defined by feeling, but by obedience, rhythm, and visible usefulness. To wake early, work hard, pray at the right hours, and sleep when told, these were not habits, but proof of moral balance. Anything that fell outside this rhythm became suspicious. A person who stayed silent too long was not assumed to be thoughtful. They were assumed to be hiding something. A villager who stared into the distance while others worked was not daydreaming. They were believed to be listening to voices that should not be heard. Medieval superstition signs crept into daily life quietly like fog along a dirt road, blurring the line between personality and danger. Picture a blacksmith, strong and skilled, whose hammer once rang steady against iron. Over time, his strikes slow. He pauses more often, gazing into the fire as if searching for something lost inside the flames. Today, we might recognize fatigue, burnout, or depression. In medieval villages, his silence becomes a story. The fire, once his tool, is now rumored to speak back to him. Neighbors cross themselves when he passes. The priest watches him more closely during Mass. Without a single accusation spoken aloud, his fate begins to change. Or consider a young woman who lingers by the river longer than expected,
tracing shapes in the water with her fingers, smiling at thoughts no one else can see. In another age, she might be called creative, introspective, or simply bored. In medieval Europe, her wandering attention unsettles those around her. Dreams were not private then. Dreams were messages, warnings, or temptations. To drift too deeply into imagination was to risk being pulled away from God's order. Her laughter, soft and distant, becomes evidence not of joy, but of instability. History for sleep often focuses on battles and crowns, but the quiet terror of misinterpretation shaped far more lives. An old man sits on a bench near the fields, watching clouds move slowly across the sky. He speaks little now, though once he told stories endlessly. Age has softened his voice, slowed his thoughts. To us, this is aging. To them, it is decline of spirit. Memory loss is not illness, it is weakness of faith. Confusion is not neurological, it is moral failure. Medieval mental illness beliefs did not separate body, mind, and soul. They were fused into a single fragile judgment. When society defined sanity through religious conformity and productivity, difference became a threat. Not loud, not violent, just wrong. The most dangerous part was not punishment, but labeling. Once named as touched, troubled, or unbalanced, a person's story no longer belonged to them. The village spoke for them. The church interpreted them. Fear finished the rest. This is where the true power lay, not in chains or flames, but in quiet agreement. Everyone believed they were protecting order. Everyone believed they were right. And so ordinary human behaviors, silence, sadness, imagination, withdrawal, slipped from normal life into the shadowed category of madness. As the wind moves through medieval streets and distant bells echo across stone walls, remember this softly. In the Middle Ages, sanity was not about health, it was about fitting in, and those who didn't were never simply left alone.
As night settles over a medieval village, silence becomes louder than speech. In a world without clocks, without private rooms, without psychological language, quiet is never neutral. Silence is watched. Stillness is measured. In the Middle Ages, medieval mental illness beliefs taught people that the soul was always active, praying, confessing, resisting temptation. To appear mentally absent was not rest, it was absence of spiritual discipline. A person who withdrew from conversation, who answered slowly, who lingered too long in thought, seemed to others like an open door. And open doors invited things that could not be seen. Medieval mental illness beliefs didn't arrive with bangs, they began with subtle shifts. A pause before answering a question, a gaze that lingered just beyond another person's face, a reluctance to join communal meals. These moments, so ordinary to us, were read as warnings. Villages functioned on visibility. To be healthy was to be seen working, praying, laughing at the right moments. When someone faded quietly into themselves, fear filled the gap left behind. Imagine a woman who begins to speak less after the loss of a child. Her grief folds inward. She keeps her eyes lowered during Mass, her voice barely audible. Today, we recognize mourning. In medieval society, prolonged sorrow disrupted divine order. Grief was acceptable, but only briefly. To remain sad was to question God's will. Whispers follow her like shadows. Perhaps she is resisting consolation. Perhaps she is clinging to pain because something else has already taken hold of her. The mind in this belief system could not suffer alone. It was always influenced.
Or think of a young man who moves more slowly than others, whose thoughts drift during sermons, whose hands tremble when spoken to sharply. Anxiety, in our language, was unknown then. Nervousness was interpreted as guilt searching for a cause. If the body shook, the soul must be hiding something. If the eyes avoided contact, the heart must be burdened with sin. Medieval mental illness beliefs turned inward experiences outward, projecting meaning onto every gesture. Even sleep itself became suspect. Those who slept too deeply, who struggled to wake, who seemed lost in dreams were thought to wander beyond safe spiritual boundaries. Dreams were not psychological processes, they were visitations. To dream vividly was to be visited. To wake disoriented was to return from somewhere dangerous. History for sleep may soothe us now, but in the Middle Ages, sleep could condemn you. A villager who spoke of strange dreams risked being watched more closely. Better to stay silent. Better to pretend rest was empty and uneventful. This fear shaped behavior long before punishment ever appeared. People learned to perform normalcy. Smiles became armor. Conversation became camouflage. Those who could not perform, the shy, the melancholic, the inward, stood exposed. And yet, exposure did not require accusation, it required agreement. The community did not need proof, only pattern. When someone repeatedly stepped outside expectation, their difference became a story others told for them. This is how ordinary human states transformed into medieval diagnoses without names. Not written in books, not declared by scholars, but carried through glances and murmurs. A man who preferred solitude was said to be listening too closely to himself. A woman who spoke passionately one day and withdrew the next was thought unstable. Emotional variation, something we now see as human, was feared as inconsistency of the soul. Stillness, in particular, frightened medieval minds. Motion meant purpose. Purpose meant alignment with God. To sit quietly, unmoving, thinking, that was dangerous territory. It suggested an inner world separate from the community's control, and anything uncontrollable was threatening. This is why the quiet ones were watched most closely, not because they disrupted order, but because they reminded others how fragile that order truly was. As candles flicker behind small windows and the village settles into uneasy rest, remember this: in the Middle Ages, silence was never just silence. It was a question, and the wrong answer could follow you for the rest of your life.
In the medieval world, emotion itself was something to be controlled, moderated, and closely observed. Feeling was never private, it spilled outward, and whatever spilled outward invited judgment. Medieval mental illness beliefs did not fear emptiness alone, they feared excess. Too little feeling suggested absence of spirit, but too much feeling was far more dangerous. Intensity unsettled people. Passion confused them. A person who laughed loudly one day and wept openly the next appeared unstable, unpredictable, untethered from divine balance. Emotional consistency was mistaken for moral strength. Variation became a warning. Imagine a young man who speaks with fire when he believes he is right, whose voice rises when telling stories, whose hands move as if his thoughts cannot stay still. In another time, he might be called charismatic, expressive, alive. In the Middle Ages, such energy raised suspicion. Why did his emotions move so freely? Why did he not restrain himself? Strong feeling suggested weak control, and weak control left space for intrusion. The belief was simple and terrifying. If you did not govern your emotions, something else would. Medieval mental illness beliefs filled the gap where understanding did not exist.
They replaced uncertainty with story, and stories spread faster than truth. Even compassion had limits. A woman who cried often might receive sympathy at first, but sympathy faded quickly when tears did not stop. Persistent emotion exhausted the patience of communities already struggling to survive. At that point, concern shifted into fear, fear into distance, distance into judgment. This slow progression mattered. Very few people were suddenly condemned. Most were gradually redefined. Bit by bit, their emotional life became evidence against them. History for sleep often feels gentle because time has softened its edges. But living inside that system meant knowing that your inner life was never fully yours. Every smile, every outburst, every tear existed under watch. To feel deeply was to risk standing out, and standing out in medieval society was dangerous, especially for women. Emotional expression in women was expected, but only within narrow boundaries. Too quiet, and she was cold. Too passionate, and she was unstable. The same behavior that might be tolerated in men could condemn women faster, because female emotion was already considered closer to chaos, closer to the body, closer to temptation. A woman who spoke too boldly, loved too fiercely, grieved too long, or imagined too vividly could be labeled without resistance. Once labeled, the path ahead narrowed. Not always toward punishment, sometimes toward isolation, exclusion, or forced correction. This is the quiet cruelty of the medieval mindscape. It did not always burn, it often simply erased. Erased nuance, erased context, erased the truth that humans are not steady creatures. As torches flicker along narrow streets and voices soften behind stone walls, remember this truth gently. In the Middle Ages, feeling too much was as dangerous as feeling too little. Emotion was not understood as experience, it was interpreted as risk. And for those whose hearts moved freely, the world responded by tightening its grip.
In medieval society, thinking differently was not celebrated as insight. It was endured only when it remained invisible. The moment a private thought became visible, spoken aloud, acted upon, or simply noticed, it entered dangerous territory. Medieval mental illness beliefs treated independent thought as instability, not curiosity. To question was to wobble, to doubt was to fracture, and to hold beliefs that did not mirror the church or the village was to step outside the narrow border of safety. In a world where truth flowed downward from authority, the individual mind was not trusted to generate meaning on its own. It was meant to receive, repeat, and obey. Imagine a man who listens carefully during sermons, not to absorb, but to weigh words silently against his own understanding. He nods when others nod, but his eyes narrow slightly, not in defiance, but in reflection. He asks questions quietly at home, never in public. Yet even silence carries weight. Over time, people sense that his agreement is practiced, not felt. This subtle difference is enough. Independent thought does not need rebellion to be feared. It only needs distance. Or consider a woman whose faith is sincere yet deeply personal. She prays alone more than with others. She speaks to God in her own words, not always the approved ones. Her devotion is quiet, inward, shaped by experience rather than ritual. Today, we might call this spirituality. In the Middle Ages, it was unsettling. Faith was communal. God was accessed through structure. To bypass that structure suggested arrogance, delusion, or worse, false inspiration.
Medieval superstition signs crept into interpretation once again. A person guided by inner conviction rather than external authority seemed unreliable. If their thoughts came from within, where did they truly come from? The medieval mind answered this question with suspicion. Not all thoughts were one's own. Some were planted, some were whispered, some were sent as tests, others as traps. This belief collapsed the boundary between insight and illness. A person who claimed certainty without approval appeared dangerous. A person who changed beliefs appeared unstable. Even hesitation could be misread. To think slowly, to process deeply, to revise one's understanding over time, these were not intellectual virtues. They were signs of confusion. History for sleep reminds us that knowledge once moved at the pace of rumor and ritual. Certainty was valued over accuracy, repetition over reflection. A person who lingered too long in thought disrupted that rhythm. Their mind moved at a different speed, and difference was always threatening. Children who asked persistent questions learned this early. Curiosity was tolerated only when it led back to the same answers. Questions that wandered were corrected. Adults who continued to wander mentally were watched. The fear was not that they would be wrong, but that they would influence others. Independent thought was contagious. One mind drifting could pull another with it. This is why medieval societies often linked unconventional thinking to mental instability. It justified control. If a belief was framed as illness, it could be corrected without debate. Compassion became intervention. Correction became salvation. And the individual's inner world was overwritten by the needs of order. Those who lived inside their thoughts, philosophers without titles, observers without language, introspective souls, often learned to mask themselves. They spoke less, they simplified their ideas. They hid complexity behind obedience. Not because they were wrong, but because survival required invisibility. This is the quiet tragedy beneath medieval mental illness beliefs. It did not only punish extremes, it flattened nuance. It erased interiority. It taught people to fear their own minds. As night deepens and the medieval world grows still, imagine how many thoughts went unspoken, how many insights dissolved before ever taking shape. Minds that could have explored gently instead folded inward, cautious, guarded, not broken, restrained. And that restraint, repeated over generations, became normal. Remember this softly as you drift. In the Middle Ages, the greatest danger was not madness itself, it was thinking alone in a world that demanded shared certainty. By the time a medieval village decided who you were, it rarely needed to say it out loud. Labels did not arrive with ceremony. They settled slowly like dust until they covered everything you touched. Medieval mental illness beliefs worked less like diagnosis and more like inheritance. Once a person was seen as troubled, unstable, or different, every future action bent to that interpretation. Silence confirmed it. Emotion proved it. Thought sealed it. And so what began as ordinary human behavior became a fixed identity. The blacksmith who stared too long into the fire was no longer tired, he was suspect. The woman who dreamed vividly was no longer imaginative, she was watched. The man who questioned quietly was no longer thoughtful, he was unsafe. This is how fate formed, not through sudden punishment, but through narrowed possibility. People stopped asking what you felt and began deciding what you were. And once decided, the world responded accordingly. Work opportunities faded, social invitations thinned, trust quietly withdrew. No law was broken, no sentence declared, and yet life closed in. History for sleep often softens this truth, but the medieval world was deeply skilled at exclusion without violence. A person did not need to be chained to be contained. They only needed to be understood in one way, forever. Middle Ages superstition signs were powerful precisely because they felt moral. Communities believed they were protecting themselves, protecting faith, protecting order. To them, labeling was not cruelty, it was responsibility. A person who deviated threatened not just themselves, but the fragile balance holding famine, disease, and fear at bay. And so mercy became conditional. Compassion lasted only as long as conformity seemed possible. When difference persisted, patience ended. This was the final weight placed upon the medieval mind, the knowledge that return was difficult. Once you crossed the invisible line, even unknowingly, coming back was rare. Redemption existed in theory, but suspicion lingered longer than forgiveness. A changed behavior was seen as performance. A calm expression was seen as concealment. The past followed you, reshaping every present moment. This is why so many people learned to disappear quietly. They shrank themselves, softened their voices, hid their thoughts. Not because they were ill, but because survival demanded neutrality. And neutrality in medieval society was safety. Yet beneath this enforced stillness, human longing remained. People still loved, still hoped, still sought connection. But connection now carried risk. To be chosen, to belong, to marry, to be trusted, these were privileges guarded by reputation, and reputation, once cracked, rarely healed. This is where the story begins to shift, because the same society that judged minds also controlled bodies, relationships, and futures. If your thoughts were suspect, your capacity to love was questioned. If your emotions were unstable, your ability to marry was doubted. Mental difference did not remain private. It followed you into intimacy, into family, into belonging. And so, as this chapter draws to a close, listen closely to what comes next, because the medieval fear of the mind did not stop at judgment. It moved quietly into how people chose partners, defined desire, and decided who was worthy of love. What happened when affection itself became evidence? When longing was measured for sanity, when marriage was used as correction rather than connection. That story waits just beyond this moment, but for now, rest with this truth. In the Middle Ages, society did not simply observe the mind, it claimed it, and once claimed, everything else followed.
When the northern sea breathes against frozen shores, it carries more than salt and wind. It carries memory. In the Viking Age, love was never allowed to drift freely like mist across the fjords. It was anchored, weighted, and measured. Not because Vikings lacked feeling, but because survival demanded structure. Viking marriage customs were born in a world where winter could kill, enemies could arrive without warning, and isolation meant death. In such a landscape, love could not exist only in the heart. It had to exist in law, in bloodlines, in alliances strong enough to endure hardship. Imagine a Viking settlement at dusk, the sky painted in muted blues and silver. Waves roll gently against longships pulled onto the shore. Inside a timber hall, firelight flickers over carved beams. This is where marriages are discussed long before they are celebrated. Love in the Viking Age often began not with whispered promises, but with negotiations spoken aloud among kin. Families gathered, voices calm but deliberate, weighing land, livestock, honor, and future security. Marriage was not merely a union between two people. It was a binding agreement between households, a promise that resources would be shared and protection offered.
To modern ears, this may sound cold, but in a world balanced on uncertainty, such arrangements were acts of care disguised as contracts. Mead flowed freely during wedding feasts, horns raised high as drums echoed softly through the hall. Vows were spoken not only before gods, but before the watching community. Love was expected to grow within the framework provided. Affection was welcomed, but only after stability was secured. A Viking couple did not ask first if they loved each other, they asked whether they could survive together. Yet beneath this structure, human emotion persisted, quietly resisting containment. Consider a young woman promised to a man chosen by her family, a union meant to strengthen alliances across the fjord. She understands the logic, she knows the risks of refusal, yet her heart leans elsewhere, towards someone with fewer lands, fewer cattle, but familiar laughter. In the Viking world, such inner conflict was dangerous, not sinful, but destabilizing. To follow the heart too openly threatened social balance. And so many learned to love carefully. Love became layered, public loyalty on the surface, private feeling beneath. Viking love stories, when read closely, often carry this tension. Sagas speak of devotion proven through endurance rather than romance. Love was not measured by words, but by actions, by standing beside someone during famine, by defending their kin, by honoring agreements even when desire pulled elsewhere. A man who abandoned duty for passion risked being seen as unreliable. A woman who resisted a planned marriage risked dishonor, not just for herself, but for her entire family. Viking marriage customs thus shaped emotional expression. They taught restraint, not suppression, but control. Feelings were real, but they were expected to bend toward survival. This expectation echoes deeply with the themes of History for Sleep, where we see again and again how societies shape the most intimate parts of human life. In the Viking Age, love was not dismissed, it was managed, carefully, strategically. Yet management came at a cost. Emotional silence became common. Longing learned to wait. Desire learned to speak in glances rather than declarations. This was not cruelty, but adaptation. The North demanded it. As wind hums softly through grass roofs and the fire settles into embers, remember this gently. In the Viking world, love was not free because life itself was not free. To love was to choose endurance over impulse, stability over uncertainty, and belonging over longing. And it is here, in this quiet tension between heart and survival, that the deeper story begins.
Not every Viking marriage began with resistance, but many began without choice. In the North, consent was often shaped by circumstance rather than desire. A union agreed upon by families carried the weight of law long before the couple ever shared a glance. Viking marriage customs allowed little space for hesitation once agreements were sealed. To refuse was not romantic defiance, it was social rupture. Imagine a young man standing inside the longhouse on the night his marriage is announced. The fire crackles softly. Elders speak with calm certainty, and his name is repeated as if already decided. He listens, not in shock, but in quiet narrowing. He understands what is expected. He understands that this union will secure land, reinforce alliances, protect his kin. What he does not understand yet is how to live inside a decision made without his heart. Across the hall, the woman chosen for him feels a different kind of weight. Her face remains composed, her posture steady. Inside, emotion does not erupt, it settles. Viking culture did not encourage visible resistance. Strength was shown through endurance. She has learned this early. To protest openly would not change the outcome, it would only change how she is remembered.
and so both enter the marriage carrying silence rather than consent. Love in the Viking Age was often expected to arrive later, like spring after winter. People believed affection could be built through shared hardship. Eat together, work together, survive together. Feelings would follow. Sometimes they did, sometimes they did not. This uncertainty was accepted as part of life. A marriage did not fail simply because love was absent. It failed only when loyalty broke. In this quiet framework, couples learned to read each other slowly. A glance held too long while passing bread, a hand steadying another during rough seas. These were not gestures of romance, but signals of potential. Viking love stories rarely celebrate passion at first sight. They honor patience, they honor adaptation. But adaptation does not erase longing. In this marriage, both carry private histories. He remembers laughter with someone he did not choose. She remembers conversations that felt lighter, easier, before duty closed around her future. Neither speaks of this. Words would not free them. Instead, they test the edges of their arrangement. He fulfills his role. She fulfills hers. Respect grows first. Trust follows cautiously. Love, if it comes, must find space between obligation and survival. Viking marriage customs allowed women certain protections unusual for their time. A wife could own property, demand compensation if mistreated, even initiate divorce under specific conditions. Yet these rights existed within rigid expectations. Emotional fulfillment was not guaranteed. It was optional, secondary. To expect love was considered indulgent. To demand it was dangerous. Over time, the couple learns to share silence without discomfort. This too is a form of intimacy. In the North, silence was not emptiness. It was space. Space to endure, space to observe, space where feeling could grow quietly without threatening order. History for Sleep reminds us that many human bonds are forged not in choice, but in adaptation. This couple does not become a tragedy, nor do they become a fairy tale. They become something more common. Two people learning how to live with the life they were given. And in that learning, a subtle affection emerges. Not explosive, not dramatic, but steady enough to survive winters. This is the kind of love Viking society respected most. Love that did not disrupt duty. Love that strengthened the group. Love that endured without asking to be seen. As night deepens over the fjord and the longhouse settles into rest, remember this softly. In the Viking world, love was often discovered after commitment, not before. And for many, that discovery was quiet, complicated, and real.
In the Viking world, love did not exist alone between two people. It was always surrounded by law, by honor, by the watchful memory of the community. Even when affection slowly grew within a marriage, it never belonged solely to the couple. It belonged to the clan, the ancestors, and the future yet to come. Viking marriage customs were designed to protect this collective survival, but in doing so, they quietly build a cage around intimacy. Every gesture, every choice, every silence carried social weight. Honor was the invisible currency that governed relationships. A man's honor rested not only on his courage in battle, but on his reliability as a husband and ally. A woman's honor rested on her perceived loyalty, modesty, and obedience to established roles. Love that disrupted these expectations became dangerous, not immoral, destabilizing. Imagine the couple from before, now settled into daily life. They work side by side, share meals, endure storms and long winters together. Affection exists, subtle but real. Yet around them, the village watches, not openly, quietly.
Reputation in Viking society was built through observation over time. A husband who listened too closely to his wife's wishes might be seen as weak. A wife who spoke too freely of her feelings might be seen as reckless. Love had to remain properly shaped, balanced, controlled. Law reinforced these expectations. Marriage contracts defined obligations clearly. Property, inheritance, and lineage mattered more than emotion. Love in the Viking Age was expected to support these structures, not challenge them. If it did, the community responded not with outrage, but with correction, advice, pressure, subtle reminders of one's place. A couple that leaned too far toward personal happiness risked being seen as selfish, and selfishness in a world of shared survival was unforgivable. Viking love stories preserved in sagas often reflect this tension. Love is present, but rarely triumphant. It endures, compromises, or fades, always shaped by honor. Characters who defy expectations do not simply suffer emotionally, they face exile, feuds, or lasting shame. This was not cruelty for its own sake. It was the logic of a society that could not afford instability. To love freely was a luxury the North did not allow. For women, this cage was narrower. Even with legal rights, social judgment moved faster than law. A woman suspected of emotional unpredictability risked being labeled unfit, not only as a wife, but as a member of the community. Here, the echoes of medieval mental illness beliefs resurface. Strong emotion, attachment, or longing could be interpreted as imbalance. A woman who appeared too attached to her husband might be seen as dependent, too detached, and she was cold. Either way, deviation invited scrutiny. Men faced their own constraints. A man guided too openly by emotion risked losing authority. Love could soften him in ways society did not trust. Tenderness was permitted in private, but expected to disappear in public. The result was a culture of restraint, where intimacy learned to hide. History for Sleep invites us to observe this without judgment. These people were not unfeeling, they were careful. Love existed, but it had to move quietly, like a flame shielded from wind. Many couples learned to express affection through duty rather than words, through staying, through not leaving when hardship arrived. This was love translated into endurance, yet the cost was real. Desire learned to be patient, longing learned to be silent, and sometimes love learned to disappear entirely, leaving behind respect without warmth. As night settles deeper over the fjord and the village rests in uneasy peace, remember this gently. In the Viking world, love survived only when it aligned with honor. When it did not, it was reshaped, restrained, or quietly erased. Not because hearts were weak, but because the world around them demanded strength above all else.
As Viking communities grew more interconnected, personal choice became increasingly visible, and visibility brought risk. In small settlements bound by shared survival, deviation was not merely noticed, it was remembered. Viking marriage customs did not exist to punish love, but to contain it, to keep it aligned with the fragile equilibrium of the North. Yet containment required constant reinforcement. Laws were spoken aloud, repeated, remembered. But social judgment moved faster than law, shaping lives long before any formal action was taken. Imagine a couple whose affection has deepened beyond quiet cooperation. Their bond is no longer only functional, it is felt. Seen in the way they sit closer than expected, in how they consult one another before decisions,
in how their loyalty bends inward rather than outward. These are small signs, almost invisible, but in a Viking village, small signs accumulate meaning. Elders notice, kin whisper, not in anger, but in concern. The concern is framed as protection. Love that draws too tightly between two people threatens the wider network of obligation. If a husband prioritizes his wife's wishes over clan needs, he risks being unreliable. If a wife's loyalty appears too exclusive, she risks being viewed as isolating her husband from his duties. Love, when too focused, becomes suspect. This is where law and custom intertwine. Marriage contracts outlined expectations clearly, but they could not regulate emotion. Instead, society learned to regulate behavior: who spoke in assemblies, whose voice carried weight, whose opinions were deferred to. A couple expressing too much autonomy found themselves subtly corrected. Invitations thinned, requests for counsel stopped arriving. Their influence receded without confrontation. This was not punishment, it was recalibration. Love in the Viking Age was allowed only insofar as it strengthened collective survival. When it appeared to compete with it, the response was quiet containment. For women, this pressure intensified. Even a hint of personal preference could be reinterpreted as emotional instability. Here, the older medieval patterns of mental suspicion re-emerge. A woman advocating for her own choice might be labeled willful. Willfulness was dangerous because it suggested an inner authority. Inner authority, especially in matters of love, was mistrusted. It implied desire untethered from duty. Men, too, were shaped by this environment. A man guided openly by affection risked appearing soft. Softness threatened honor. Honor protected status, and status ensured survival. The chain was unforgiving. Many couples responded by learning restraint at a deeper level. They loved privately and performed publicly. At home, affection existed. In the village, roles dominated. This split created a dual life, one of feeling, one of function. Over time, the split became normal. Children grew up observing it, absorbing the lesson that love was safest when quiet. Viking love stories echo this lesson again and again. Love rarely conquers, it adapts or retreats. Those who refuse adaptation often disappear from the narrative, not because they lacked passion, but because passion without permission had no place to land. History for Sleep asks us to notice the human cost of such systems without condemnation. These communities were not cruel by design, they were cautious by necessity. Yet caution shapes the heart. It teaches desire to measure itself. It teaches longing to wait for approval that may never come. And sometimes it teaches people to forget what they wanted at all. As the northern night stretches long and the village settles into familiar routines, remember this softly. In the Viking world, choice was not forbidden, it was risky. And love learned to survive not by insisting, but by yielding just enough to remain unseen.
In the end, Viking love did not fail because people lacked feeling. It endured precisely because feeling was restrained. What defined love in the Viking Age was not how fiercely it burned, but how carefully it was carried. Marriage, belonging, and emotional survival became deeply intertwined. To be married was not simply to be partnered, but to be placed within a web of expectations that determined where you stood, who you answered to, and how much of yourself you were allowed to reveal. Viking marriage customs ensured that no love existed without consequence. Belonging came with boundaries, and crossing those boundaries, even quietly, changed how the world responded to you.
The couple we have followed now understands this fully. They have learned when to speak and when to remain silent, when to show affection and when to let it fade into routine. Their love has survived, but it has been reshaped, not diminished, redirected. They belong, and belonging offers safety, yet safety demands sacrifice. To belong is to be seen in one way only, and once seen, deviation becomes costly. This is the unspoken rule beneath Viking society. Visibility brings judgment. The more closely your life is observed, the less freely your heart may move. For many, this trade felt necessary. Love that existed within the rules granted protection, legitimacy, and future security. Love that stepped outside those rules invited uncertainty, and uncertainty was the enemy of survival. This is why Viking love stories often end not with triumph, but with acceptance. Acceptance of limits, acceptance of roles, acceptance that the self must sometimes yield to the group. History for Sleep shows us that such acceptance was not always peaceful. It carried grief beneath its calm surface, longing unspoken, choices never made. But it also carried resilience. People learned to live fully inside narrow spaces, to find meaning without spectacle, to love without announcement, and this quiet endurance became a virtue. Yet the story does not end in the village, because beyond the longhouse, beyond the fjord, another world waited. One where love did not simply serve survival, but power. Where marriage was not just alliance, but strategy. Where affection could elevate or destroy reputations. Where whispers traveled faster and echoes louder. When love entered halls of authority, it no longer moved quietly. It became visible by design, measured, recorded, exploited, and judged. The same instincts that once governed Viking villages would intensify within courts and noble houses. Belonging would become currency, reputation would become weapon, and love, once carefully contained, would become dangerous. As this chapter closes, let your thoughts rest on this gentle truth. In the Viking world, love survived by knowing not to be seen. But when love stepped into power, invisibility was no longer an option. And what followed was not silence, but scandal, legacy, and the rewriting of history itself.
In the Medici court, love did not unfold quietly. It shimmered beneath chandeliers, echoed through marble halls, and lingered in the spaces between glances. Florence during the Renaissance was alive with beauty, intellect, and power, but it was also saturated with observation. Nothing remained private for long. In this world, affection was never just emotion, it was information. Medici love scandal did not begin with betrayal or excess, but with visibility. A look held a moment too long, a gesture repeated too often, a presence noticed where it should not have been. Renaissance court secrets were rarely written down. They were carried by whispers, passed along corridors, shaped by interpretation rather than fact. And once shaped, they became reality. Imagine the Medici palace at night, candles flickering against frescoed walls, string music drifting softly through the air. Conversations flow politely, laughter restrained, every word chosen carefully. Here, love is not forbidden, but it is dangerous. To love openly is to reveal vulnerability. To reveal vulnerability is to invite judgment. And judgment in a court built on reputation is power. In Medici history, social standing depended not only on bloodline, but on perception. A noble's worth could rise or fall not by action, but by rumor. Love and scandal were inseparable because affection suggested preference, and preference suggested weakness. If a courtier loved the wrong person, it raised questions.
Who influenced them? Whose loyalty had shifted? Love was political, whether intended or not. Consider a noblewoman admired for her grace, her silence, her flawless composure. One evening she is seen speaking too intimately with a man of lesser rank. No touch, no declaration, just proximity. But proximity is enough. By morning, the court has rewritten the scene. What was once conversation becomes implication. Implication becomes story. Story becomes truth. In the Medici court, there was no clear line between behavior and accusation. Mental balance itself could be questioned through rumor. A woman who seemed too emotional, too attached, too distracted by affection, risked being labeled unstable. Echoes of medieval mental illness beliefs persisted even into the Renaissance. Strong feeling was still mistrusted. Passion suggested loss of control. Loss of control suggested unfitness for court life. Thus, love became evidence, not of devotion, but of disorder. Men were not immune. A nobleman who pursued affection openly risked being portrayed as reckless, indulgent, or morally weak. If scandal attached to his name, his political allies withdrew quietly. Invitations stopped. Influence faded. He was not arrested, he was erased. History for Sleep often paints Renaissance courts as elegant and refined, but beneath the silk lay constant fear. Fear of being seen incorrectly, fear of being spoken about, fear that one misinterpreted gesture could undo years of careful self-fashioning. Love in this environment required extraordinary caution. Many learned to suppress affection entirely. Others engaged in it secretly, knowing that secrecy itself carried danger. A secret once discovered was worse than openness. It suggested deception, and deception implied guilt. This is how scandal operated as a social weapon. It did not require proof, it required plausibility. And plausibility was constructed from the smallest human behaviors: a blush, a smile, a hesitation. In the Medici court, society did not need to punish love directly. It only needed to talk about it. And talk, repeated often enough, became judgment. As the music fades and candles burn lower, remember this gently. In Florence's halls of power, love was not a refuge. It was a risk, and for those who misjudged the weight of a single look, the cost could be an entire life reshaped by rumor.
The fall did not begin with a crime. It began with a whisper. In the Medici court, whispers were more dangerous than daggers because they left no wounds that could be proven. A nobleman, once favored for his measured speech and steady alliances, found himself at the center of quiet attention. He had not broken a law, he had not defied an order. He had simply been seen too often in the company of the wrong person. A private conversation by a window, a shared smile during a banquet, a hand withdrawn a moment too late. In another place, these gestures would have meant nothing. In Florence, they meant everything. Renaissance court secrets were born in such moments, shaped not by intent, but by interpretation. Someone noticed, someone repeated, someone embellished. By the time the story reached the far end of the hall, it no longer resembled the truth. It did not need to. Medici love scandal operated on plausibility, not evidence. The nobleman's reputation began to soften at the edges. Invitations arrived less frequently. His counsel was requested with delay, then not at all. Allies spoke warmly in public, but grew distant in private. This was not punishment, it was precaution. Association itself carried risk. To be seen defending a tainted name invited suspicion by proximity.
The court did not declare him guilty, it simply behaved as if he might be. The woman at the center of the rumor suffered a different fate. Her silence was interpreted as confession, her composure as calculation, her withdrawal as proof. In a culture that still carried medieval anxieties about emotion and control, her perceived attachment became a question of stability. Was she too influenced by feeling, too susceptible, too disruptive? The language of mental balance quietly entered the conversation, cloaked in concern. She was advised to rest, to travel, to remove herself for her own good. Removal, in the Medici court, was a polite erasure. Love and scandal intertwined until neither could be separated. The nobleman attempted correction. He adjusted his behavior, reduced his visibility, leaned harder into duty. But correction, once required, only confirmed suspicion. Each careful step looked rehearsed. Each restraint looked like concealment. The whisper had momentum. It no longer needed him. History, for sleep, often reveals this pattern. Once reputation shifts, action cannot outrun interpretation. The court thrives on narrative coherence, not mercy. A story that explains discomfort will always be chosen over uncertainty. Eventually, a formal reason emerged, not the rumor itself, but a secondary failure. An administrative delay, a misjudged alliance, a procedural oversight. Small enough to be plausible, large enough to justify exclusion. The nobleman was reassigned, then sidelined, then forgotten. No trial, no confrontation, just absence. His name lingered only as a cautionary tale spoken softly to younger courtiers learning how not to be seen. The woman disappeared from records more completely. A marriage arranged, a convent suggested, a household transfer made quietly. Her inner life was never documented, only her removal. This is the cruelty of scandal in the Medici court. It does not roar, it rearranges. It edits the social landscape until certain figures no longer fit the composition, and so they are painted out. As strings hum gently and candlelight dims, remember this truth. In Renaissance Florence, reputation was not the reflection of character, it was the condition for existence. And once a whisper redefined you, the court no longer needed your presence to remember your fall.
At a certain point in the Medici court, scandal stopped being accidental. It became useful. What began as uncontrolled whispers slowly evolved into something sharper, more intentional. Those who understood the mechanics of reputation learned that love could be turned into leverage. In a society where public image defined access to power, to question someone's emotional conduct was to question their fitness to rule, advise, or belong. Medici history reveals that the most effective attacks were not made through force, but through narrative. A story planted at the right moment could dismantle a rival more cleanly than exile or execution. Love was ideal material. It was intimate enough to feel believable, yet ambiguous enough to resist refutation. Renaissance court secrets thrived on this ambiguity. A rumored affair suggested divided loyalty. Divided loyalty suggested weakness. Weakness justified removal. Consider how easily affection could be reframed. A friendship became attachment. Attachment became obsession. Obsession became instability. Each step sounded reasonable when spoken softly, with concern rather than accusation. This was the genius of scandal as power. It did not demand outrage, it invited agreement.
Courtiers learned to weaponize empathy. They spoke not of sin, but of imbalance, not of betrayal, but of distraction. In doing so, they echoed older medieval mental illness beliefs, repackaged for a Renaissance audience. A man rumored to be too influenced by love might be portrayed as incapable of clear judgment. A woman associated with emotional intensity could be described as disruptive, unpredictable, even dangerous to the social order. Once such descriptions took hold, official action became unnecessary. The court adjusted around the narrative. Invitations were redirected. Decisions were made elsewhere. Influence evaporated. The target did not fall loudly, they faded, and fading was the goal. This strategy was especially effective because it required no proof. Denial only fed suspicion. Silence appeared as guilt. Defense appeared as desperation. The accused were trapped within the story written about them. History for Sleep reminds us that power often prefers quiet solutions. Scandal allowed rulers to reshape their courts without bloodshed. Rivals were neutralized, alliances dissolved, inconvenient figures removed, all under the guise of moral concern. Love and scandal intertwined until even genuine affection became dangerous. People learned to regulate not just behavior, but perception. A glance was calculated, a smile rationed, emotion performed only when safe. Those closest to power suffered the most. Visibility magnified risk. The higher one stood, the further one could fall. This is why Renaissance courts felt both dazzling and suffocating. Beauty masked surveillance, art concealed anxiety. The Medici court perfected this balance. Patronage flourished, but so did fear. Love was no longer a private vulnerability, it was a public liability. And scandal, once mastered, became a language of control. As strings hum softly and the palace settles into artificial calm, remember this truth. In the Medici court, scandal was not chaos, it was order, carefully maintained through stories that decided who deserved to remain in the light.
Some fell slowly. Others vanished all at once. In the Medici court, there were names that did not fade, they were removed. One such figure lived at the edge of power, close enough to be noticed, distant enough to be unprotected. His rise had been quiet, earned through competence rather than bloodline. He was useful, and usefulness in Florence invited attention. At first, admiration followed him, then curiosity, then scrutiny. He was seen speaking earnestly to a woman whose position made such familiarity inappropriate. Nothing improper was ever proven, but proof was irrelevant. What mattered was the narrative taking shape. Medici love scandal rarely required action. It required repetition. The story changed each time it was told. His tone became intense, his visits too frequent, his motives suspect. The court did not ask whether this was true, it asked whether it sounded possible. That was enough. Soon his name carried a weight that altered how others responded to him. Doors closed more softly than before, smiles lost warmth, conversations shortened. The court had decided he was unsafe, not criminal, but disruptive. Disruption was the true sin. Attempts to correct his image only accelerated the process. He withdrew, which appeared secretive. He defended himself, which appeared desperate. He remained silent, which appeared guilty. Each choice confirmed the story. This was the final cruelty of scandal. It removed all exits.
The woman associated with him disappeared first. Officially, she had been reassigned for her well-being. Unofficially, she had been erased. Her voice, her perspective, her truth, none survived the retelling. She existed only as a shadow in his story, and then not even that. Without her presence, the scandal sharpened. Now unbalanced, now unresolved, it demanded closure. The court found it in elimination. He was stripped of influence without announcement, his role reassigned, his work absorbed, his name omitted from future records. He was not imprisoned, he was forgotten while still alive. History for Sleep reveals this pattern repeatedly. Power does not always destroy bodies. Sometimes it destroys memory. And in Renaissance courts, memory was everything. Without it, one did not exist. The man lived on the margins afterward, alive but unrecognized, watching a world he helped shape move forward without him. He did not become a martyr, he did not become a villain, he became a warning. His story was told quietly to others as instruction. This is what happens when affection is misread, when presence becomes too visible, when love crosses into the domain of power. The Medici court resumed its rhythm. Art flourished, music continued, alliances shifted. The absence settled in unnoticed. And that was the point. Scandal had completed its task. As candlelight flickers and the night deepens, remember this gently. In the Medici court, to lose reputation was not to lose honor alone. It was to lose existence itself.
By the time Scandal completed its work, nothing appeared broken. The Medici court continued to glow with refinement. Music filled the halls, art softened the walls. Diplomacy flowed with practiced elegance. Yet beneath this, by the time Scandal completed its work, nothing appeared broken. The Medici court continued to glow with refinement. Music filled the halls, art softened the walls. Diplomacy flowed with practiced elegance. Yet beneath this surface harmony lay a precise mechanism of control, perfected through reputation. Love had been transformed from a private feeling into a public liability, and scandal into a quiet sentence. This was the final lesson of the Medici world. Judgment did not need law, it needed consensus. Once enough people agreed on a story, that story replaced truth. Those who disappeared did not haunt the court with their absence. Their erasure was seamless, absorbed into routine. New names took their places, new alliances formed. The past was edited with care. History remembers the Medici as patrons, visionaries, architects of beauty. But History for Sleep invites us to notice what was required to maintain that beauty: silence, compliance, and the careful management of human emotion. Love and scandal were not accidents of court life, they were tools. Love revealed vulnerability, scandal exploited it. Together, they allowed power to operate without resistance. Those who learned this early survived. They loved cautiously, if at all. They married strategically. They kept their inner lives hidden behind composed expressions. To be human was acceptable. To be visible was dangerous. Yet even within this controlled world, fear lingered. Fear of misinterpretation. Fear of being discussed rather than consulted. Fear of becoming a story told without one's voice. Reputation hovered like a shadow, shaping behavior long before any accusation arose. This is why Renaissance courts were places of constant vigilance. Every action was measured not by intention, but how it might be retold. Love was no longer something to feel, it was something to manage. And management, once normalized, spread beyond romance into every corner of life. As this chapter closes, the lesson deepens. If reputation can erase a person, then reputation is power. But it is not the strongest power. It still depends on perception, agreement, and social machinery. Beyond it lies something colder, more absolute, a force that does not whisper, a force that does not persuade, a force that does not need stories at all. As candlelight fades and Florence sleeps, let this thought settle gently. Scandal ruled by consensus, but the next chapter belongs to fear. Fear enforced not by words, but by something far older, darker, and final.
Long before they ruled fates, they were trusted with protection. In the quiet after Rome's civil wars, as the Republic dissolved into empire, a new presence took shape beside the emperor. The Praetorian Guard emerged not as conquerors, but as caretakers. Their armor gleamed softly under the Roman sun. Their formation was precise, disciplined, reassuring. To the people, they were symbols of stability. To the emperor, they were safety made visible. The rise of the Praetorian Guard did not announce itself with thunder. It arrived with routine, with proximity, with habit. Every day, the same faces, the same watchful eyes, the same hands resting near weapons, close enough to intervene, closer than anyone else. Power in ancient Rome often traveled quietly before it struck. The Guard's power grew not because it was seized, but because it was allowed, entrusted, normalized. At first, their roles seemed simple: stand watch, escort the emperor, secure the palace. Their presence calmed fear. After decades of instability, Rome needed guardians more than heroes. The Praetorians filled that need perfectly, and need, once satisfied, deepens dependence. Over time, the emperor's world narrowed. Advisors came and went, senators debated, generals campaigned far away, but the Guard remained, always there, always listening, always close. This closeness changed everything. The Roman Empire learned a subtle lesson. Those who control access control outcomes. Those who decide who may approach the throne decide who may influence it. The Praetorian Guard did not write laws. They did not command legions across provinces. They simply stood at the threshold, and thresholds are where power condenses. History for Sleep asks us to notice how authority shifts without spectacle. The Praetorians did not challenge emperors openly, they protected them, and protection creates obligation. Gratitude becomes favor, favor becomes privilege, privilege becomes expectation. Soon, emperors relied on the Guard not just for safety, but for reassurance. The presence of loyal soldiers eased doubt. Their silence felt like consent. Their vigilance felt like support. Yet, beneath this calm surface, something colder formed. Loyalty is not a virtue when it is unexamined. The Guard's loyalty was to the office, not the man, and even that loyalty was flexible. Emperors changed, Guards remained. This imbalance mattered. The Guard began to understand their position. They saw emperors age, falter, hesitate. They saw fear behind the crown. They saw how fragile authority truly was when stripped of ceremony. Roman Empire secrets were not hidden in archives, they were visible in daily rituals. Who was allowed to stand closest? Who was consulted last? Who was ignored? The Praetorians learned to read these signs. Slowly, quietly, They realized that the emperor's power required their presence to exist. Without them, he was exposed, and exposure is vulnerability. The rise of the Praetorian Guard was not a coup, it was an accumulation, a gradual transfer of certainty. When soldiers who protect also judge, protection becomes leverage. The emperor slept more soundly knowing they stood watch, but sleep is surrender, and surrender invites control. As the Roman trumpet echoes faintly across the night and the palace settles into routine, remember this: the most dangerous power is the kind that feels like safety. And Rome, in seeking protection, placed its fate into the hands of those who would one day decide who deserved to be protected at all.
There came a moment in Rome when protection quietly crossed into judgment. It was not announced, it was felt. The Praetorian Guard had stood beside emperors long enough to understand not only how power was exercised, but how it failed. They observed hesitation, indecision, fear disguised as authority. They learned the rhythms of imperial doubt, and in learning they began to decide, not in public declarations, but in subtle shifts. A delayed response, a door left closed, a message delivered too late. In ancient Rome, timing was fate. The guard controlled timing. Emperors believed they commanded Rome, yet their days were increasingly shaped by those who managed their access to the world. Who entered the chamber? Who waited outside? Who was deemed urgent? These choices did not look like power, they looked like procedure. But procedure determines outcome more reliably than decree. The rise of the Praetorian Guard accelerated as emperors leaned on them during moments of uncertainty, illness, succession, unrest. Each crisis strengthened dependence. Each dependence narrowed imperial autonomy. When an emperor sensed danger, he trusted those closest. When he doubted his advisors, he trusted those who stood watch. Trust pooled where proximity lived, and proximity favored the guard. Over time, a quiet understanding formed. The Praetorians did not need to rebel, they needed only to wait. Emperors were mortal, guards were continuous. When a ruler weakened, the guard's opinion gained weight. When a ruler died, their decision became decisive. History records moments when emperors were chosen not by senate or lineage, but by soldiers standing at the bedside. A nod, a silence, a refusal to act. These were votes cast without ceremony. Roman Empire secrets revealed that legitimacy followed force more often than law. Once the guard supported a successor, resistance faded quickly. The city accepted what appeared inevitable. The Praetorians framed their actions as necessity. Stability required swift resolution. Disorder invited chaos. In presenting themselves as protectors of order, they justified their authority, and authority, once justified, expands. This was the cold logic of control. The guard learned that fear did not need to be visible, it only needed to be anticipated. Emperors began to rule with awareness of the men beside them. Decisions were weighed not only for policy, but for reaction. This awareness changed governance itself. Power shifted inward, becoming cautious, defensive. The throne was no longer elevated above the guard, it sat within their reach. History for Sleep invites us to watch this transformation without noise. There were no banners raised, no speeches delivered, just a gradual inversion. Those meant to protect became those who decided, and those meant to rule learned to survive under watch. As the Roman trumpet echoes softly and night settles over the city, remember this gently.
The most absolute power often arrives disguised as help, and once help becomes indispensable, it begins to command.
There was a day when Rome realized that the emperor no longer stood above the guard, he stood within it. This realization did not arrive through proclamation or revolt, but through acceptance. The Praetorian Guard had crossed an invisible line. They no longer influenced decisions quietly, they made them. And when they did, the empire complied. The rise of the Praetorian Guard reached its clearest form the moment an emperor fell not to rebellion or invasion, but to the judgment of the men sworn to protect him. No dramatic battle followed. No speech echoed through the forum. The emperor was simply removed, and the city adjusted. In ancient Rome, continuity mattered more than justice. Stability mattered more than legitimacy. The Guard understood this deeply. They acted not as usurpers, but as managers of inevitability. When an emperor proved inconvenient, too weak, too unpredictable, too costly, the solution was efficiency. They withdrew protection. They delayed response. They allowed events to unfold, and unfolding became outcome. Roman Empire secrets show us that the Guard rarely needed to strike. Their power lay in permission, to allow an emperor to rule or to allow him to fall. Once this power was demonstrated, it reshaped everything. Emperors ruled knowing their position was conditional, not on the Senate, not on the people, but on the loyalty of the men who slept closest to their door. Fear changed posture, authority softened, decisions slowed. Every glance toward the Guard became a question: am I still acceptable? This was the final inversion. The throne no longer commanded protection. Protection commanded the throne. History for Sleep invites us to notice how quietly this transformation settled. Rome did not erupt, it exhaled. The Praetorians justified their actions as guardianship. They framed removal as preservation. The emperor had failed the state. They had acted for Rome. And Rome, exhausted by uncertainty, agreed. A new emperor was elevated, chosen not for vision, but for compatibility, not for strength, but for assurance. The Guard preferred rulers who listened, who rewarded loyalty, who understood the arrangement. In this way, emperors became temporary, the Guard became permanent. Love, reputation, fear, each theme from earlier chapters converged here. The same logic applied. Power was not what one claimed, it was what others allowed. And the Praetorian Guard allowed what served them. This is the cold clarity of control. The empire did not collapse in this moment, it continued. That was the tragedy, because continuation disguised decay. When those meant to protect become those who decide, the system still functions, but its purpose shifts. It no longer serves ideals, it serves survival of the mechanism itself. As night falls over Rome and the city settles into an uneasy sleep, remember this gently. The most frightening power is not seized in chaos, it is accepted in silence. And once accepted, it rarely needs to explain itself again. There is a moment in every system when power stops pretending to be moral. In Rome, that moment arrived quietly, without ceremony, when the Praetorian Guard realized they no longer needed justification. Protection had become authority. Authority had become ownership.
The empire, once ruled by law and lineage, was now governed by access and reward. The guard understood something few dared to admit. Emperors were replaceable, loyalty was negotiable, and Rome itself would accept almost anything if the transition felt orderly. When an emperor died under uncertain circumstances, the question was no longer who deserved to rule, but who could satisfy the guard. Gold spoke more clearly than blood. Promises mattered more than virtue. The Praetorians did not announce an auction, yet everyone understood the rules. Support would be given to the candidate who ensured their privilege, their security, their future. This was not corruption in the chaotic sense. It was structured, predictable, cold. Roman Empire secrets reveal that the Senate protested weekly, bound by tradition but stripped of force. The people watched from a distance, weary of instability, willing to accept any ruler who promised calm. And so the guards stepped into the vacuum. They did not seize the throne, they handed it over for a price. In doing so, they completed the transformation begun decades earlier. Power no longer flowed from Rome to the emperor, it flowed through the Praetorian barracks. The emperor became a contractor, the guard became the state. History for Sleep invites us to observe the psychology of this shift. The soldiers did not see themselves as villains, they saw themselves as realists. They protected Rome, and Rome owed them. Each new emperor reaffirmed this logic by rewarding them lavishly. With each reward, the guard's expectation hardened. What began as gratitude became entitlement. Entitlement became threat. Emperors ruled under contract, aware that failure to pay would mean removal. The crown was heavy not with responsibility, but with debt. And debt breeds fear. Fear altered governance. Decisions were made to appease, not to lead. Short-term calm replaced long-term vision. Rome continued, but it drifted. Institutions hollowed quietly. The guard's dominance did not cause immediate collapse. That was its genius. It maintained the appearance of continuity while eroding substance. Love, reputation, fear, all the forces we have traced through earlier chapters converged here into a single truth. Power belongs to those who control consequences. The Praetorian Guard controlled life, death, and legitimacy. Nothing else mattered. As night deepens over the ancient city and the echoes of Rome soften into memory, remember this gently. The empire did not fall when it was sold. It fell when selling it became normal.
And so the circle closes. From villages that feared silence, to courts that feared love, to empires that feared loss of control, the story has always been the same. What people called madness was often difference. What they called scandal was often vulnerability. What they called protection was often power learning how to rule unseen. The Praetorian Guard did not invent fear, they mastered it. They understood that the most effective control does not shout, it waits, it watches, it allows others to adjust themselves. Rome did not fall in flames on the day the Guard sold the throne. It continued to breathe, to trade, to govern. That is why the lesson is so unsettling. Systems rarely collapse when they are cruel. They collapse when cruelty becomes ordinary, when fear becomes routine, when silence feels safer than truth. In medieval villages, a person who withdrew inward was called possessed. In Renaissance courts, a person who loved visibly was called dangerous. In Rome, an emperor who hesitated was called unfit. Different ages, same impulse. Control what you cannot understand.
Remove what you cannot predict. Power thrives where interpretation replaces empathy. History for Sleep invites us not to judge these people harshly, but to recognize ourselves within them. We still fear what is quiet. We still mistrust what feels too much. We still reward those who promise safety, even when safety costs freedom. The Praetorian Guard succeeded because Rome wanted rest more than reflection, certainty more than wisdom, and certainty always comes with a price. As the ancient city settles into memory and the night deepens around you, let this final thought arrive gently. True power does not announce itself. It convinces you to stop questioning. It teaches you that obedience is peace, that silence is balance, that sleep is safety. But history whispers something else. The moment you stop asking who decides, someone else already has. And that, more than any guard, any throne, or any empire, is the quiet danger that never sleeps.